And moving on, in an unprecedented move, over 300 army men will move the Supreme Court today to protest against the Supreme Court's direction to the CBI to register FIRs against armed forces in connection to alleged encounters in Manipur. The armed forces personnel say that the move by the Supreme Court will dilute the shield provided to them under the Armed Forces Protection Act, or AFSPA. In fact, Republic TV broke this story first to you, which developed last night. Let's listen in. And before we really play out that excerpt from the debate last night, where our editor-in-chief Arnab Goswami got this news for you first, remember, we are going to witness some unprecedented visuals in the top court today as 300 serving army men will move court to fight for their rights.
The information we have is that 300, more than 300 in fact, serving army personnel, which includes officers, NCOs and JCOs, serving army personnel are going to the Supreme Court tomorrow to file a petition to fight for their rights. And what is it that they are fighting for? Niranjan and Sagarika, please tell us.
Well, we've broken it down into 8 parts, Arnab, and we've accessed details that tomorrow afternoon it's going to happen, and it's unprecedented because 340 serving army officers will be moving the highest court. We've broken it down into 8 parts. I'll take the first 4 and then Sagarika will explain the second 4.
Sure.
First part is about representation. They're going to fight for the right of a soldier. On the point of representation, their point is, we as soldiers, our rights have been violated. We haven't been given adequate representation. Point number 2 on directions: enable us to put national security first. Point number 3 in the petition: clarity in conflict. Ensure soldiers aren't helpless in conflict zones. Point number 4, safeguard our morale, which means they are saying in their petition, ensure adequate legal and physical safeguards. Sagarika.
Very crucial points also coming in, Arnab, and here we are talking about 300 soldiers who are moving the highest court of India in their personal capacity. So it's a fight that they're fighting for justice. Now, point number 5 we are talking about here is about the soldiers' discretion that they're going to mention in their writ petition that is going to be filed in the Supreme Court tomorrow, where they say that is this discretion that is given to an officer in a conflict zone, is it absolute or is it subject to legal scrutiny? Then they also talk about the comparison that is made between the operations of the police and the military in conflict zones. Then they also talk about how the court branded them when it came to this particular order when it comes to the Manipur encounters, when the court came out and used the word murderer. So they when they're going on to ask, is it correct
there
or wrong to brand soldiers
would it be I just want to give that background of what we are speaking about here, because we're going into details. Our viewers may not be aware of the specific case. Viewers, just to put it very simply to you, the army in the defense of the security of India has taken action in several conflict zones, including the state of Manipur. I put it very broadly here. In this context, some of the actions of the army have been questioned. There is a feeling that is growing, and I would be understating it. There's a feeling that is growing in the Indian Army that the court is not sympathetic to the tough conditions in which army men do their jobs. And if every army man in Jammu and Kashmir, the Kashmir Valley, or in conflict zones in the northeast or anywhere else is now going to be, either called names or left without any legal protection, then tomorrow it becomes very difficult for them to operate in any of these zones. And therefore there has been so much anger within the forces that in an unprecedented move we are seeing tomorrow 300 serving army personnel move the court tomorrow. When this happens, it will be historic. I can tell you the entire country will be on the side of the Indian Army. You cannot call the Indian Army marauders or murderers. You cannot call them names. You can, if so, then the people who call them names should ask themselves whether they would be willing to serve on the front and face the brickbats and face the difficult situation and still keep the country together. And one small point, Sagarika and Niranjan, will give back to you, is that I spoke to some army personnel and they say, but for what we did, we would not have, the borders of this country safe in Manipur. But for what we did. Now that we have done this job, you can't pull us out and then threaten to put us in prison.
And Rhythm Anand Bharadwaj, our legal editor, who's tracking all the details and all that will happen in the top court today. Rhythm, coming to you, it's an unprecedented move. 300 serving army men who are going to fight for their rights in the top court. What really can we expect will happen in court? Give us a sense.
Well, today, very clearly, we're going to see more than 340 army personnel move in the top court. I'm going to give you a sense of what's happening here, because right behind me is the reception through which the lawyer Aishwarya Bhatti is going to be moving the Chief Justice of India's court. Let's tell our viewers that in 15 minutes from now, that mentioning is going to happen in the Chief Justice of India's court, in Court 1. There's an Independence Day festival that's happening in the Supreme Court lawns, or we would have shown you the. I'm going to still try and show you where exactly that dome is under which this particular marathon hearing is going to happen. It is so historic that for the very first time, we are going to see a hearing of this kind. Anup, my VJ, is going to show you the dome under which the hearing is going to happen. So let's tell our viewers what's going to happen today. A mentioning at 10:30 is going to happen in that hearing. That's going to happen. It's so crucial that we are going to be seeing for the first time army personnel who are there in disturbed areas move to the top court. And that's a clear view of the dome under which Court 1, where that hearing is going to happen. That hearing is going to be a small mentioning for the very first time. A mentioning, viewers, is when, for the first time, when a petition is not listed in the top court, a mentioning is made by the lawyers asking and requesting that this case should be heard along with the case that's already being heard in the court. That's what's going to happen. In this case, people who are disturbed, such as these army personnel, 340 of them who are there in disturbed areas around the country, are going to move to the top court and say, we are disturbed, our morale is shaken by the kind of orders that are being passed, their request, and these are exclusive details of the plea that's going to be filed in the top court, that's exclusively going to be accessed by us in roughly 10 minutes from now. As soon as the plea is filed here, is going to be have a larger bench, and these exclusive details coming on Republic TV, have a larger bench go and hear the case. That's what the plea in the top court is going to be. They want a larger bench to hear the case. They want this case that's being heard, the fake encounter Manipur cases that's being heard by a bench, to be heard by a larger bench. This is no longer only about the Manipur cases that is being heard by a bench in the top court, but about the morale of the army. Remember, viewers, there are two cases that are being heard in the top court. The Major Aditya case, in which there was an outrage caused in the entire India and in the army when there was an FIR that was allegedly registered against one of their own, Major Aditya. In that case, the Supreme Court protected Major Aditya. In the other case, in the fake encounter cases, the CBI has been questioned by the top court. In this case, the Supreme Court is going to be hearing this plea that's been filed by 340 army personnel, where they're asking, what about our morale? What about the orders and AFSPA that was there? There is a clear move now in the courts for dilution of AFSPA by certain people that are moving here. The court is now going to be hearing this plea for them, and there is only one request here. Their morale of the army should not be shaken, of these army men, and several people only coming here with this move and asking and praying that the army's morale should not be shaken, and also saying at the same time, our representation needs to be understood. We are working in conflict zones. Also give us security and protect us.
Absolutely, Rhythm. Thank you for giving us a background, and of course we trust you to keep us ahead on this. For now, we have more reactions coming in on this. Let's listen in.
Just a day or so ago, some soldiers who were involved in counter-insurgency operations in Manipur have been found guilty of killing certain innocent civilians. In that backdrop, the news item is that some 300 serving officers or soldiers, same term, are appearing in the Supreme Court tomorrow. The difference here is in the perception. There's a very thin line. If you look at the issue from the perspective of the man on the ground, who is confronted by an unconventional adversary, who doesn't wear a uniform, who doesn't carry a weapon openly, who can appear anywhere in any guise. And the man on the ground has to make a split-second decision. Either he kills or he gets killed. But the same thing, when examined in the cool and calm environment, detached from the situation, might acquire a different perception. I think there can't be any rigid, hard and fast rule in this regard, black and white. There are a lot of grey areas.
Most of the encounters, or the so-called fake encounters, are allegations meant and designed to tarnish the image of the Indian Army and its soldiers. More often than not, political parties for vote bank politics are involved. The role of the then government and the Chief Minister also needs to be looked into. Soldiers, more often than not, operate 24/7, 365 days in a year to protect the sanctity and authority of the state, to safeguard the homogeneity and integrity of the nation. And on very many occasions, they have to be decisive and discretion has to be exercised. There is absolutely no time whatsoever to delay the decision, as lives can be lost under this circumstance.